Magic, White and Black, the science of finite and infinite life. If a person suffers his reason to give up the control over his imagination, he surrenders one of the greatest prerogatives of man and exposes himself to danger. In the normal condition, reason guides the imagination to a certain extent. In abnormal conditions, the will of another may take its place, or it may roam without being guided, influenced only by previously existing conditions. A person who dreams does not control the actions which he performs in his dream, although he may dream that he is exercising his will. The things seen in his dream are to him realities, and he does not doubt their substantiality, while external physical objects have no existence for him, and not even the possibility of their existence comes to his consciousness. He may see before him a ditch and dream that he wills to jump over it, but he does not actually exert his will. He only follows the impulses created during his waking condition. A person in a trance may be so much under the influence of a magnetizer as to have no active will of his own and be only led by the imagination of the operator. The avenues of his external senses are closed, and he lives entirely in the subjective world, in which material objects can find no place and in which such objects could by no means be introduced. Still, what he sees is real to him, and if the operator creates a precipice in his imagination, perhaps represented by a chalk mark on the floor, to assist the imagination of the operator, the subject will, on approaching it, experience and manifest the same terror as he would in his normal state if a precipice were yawning under his feet. And if the operator should have the cruelty to will the entranced to jump over its edge, the most serious consequences to the individual might follow. A glass of water transformed into imaginary wine by the will of the mesmerizer may make the subject intoxicated, and if that water has been transformed into imaginary poison, it may injure or kill the sensitive. A powerful mesmerizer can form either a beautiful or a horrible picture in his mind, and by transferring it by his will upon the mental sphere of a sensitive, he may cause him, even if the latter is in his normal condition, either pleasure or suffering, while the mental images so created in the mind of the sensitive may again react upon others and be perceived by them. If a person is en rapport with a magnetized subject, the image or even a thought existing in the mind of the former is immediately accepted as a reality by the latter. Such states may be induced not merely during the magnetic sleep, but also during the normal condition, and without any active desire on the part of a magnetizer. If the audience sheds tears during the performance of a tragedy, although they all know that it is merely a play, they are in a state of partial magnetization. Hundreds of similar occurrences take place every day. and there's sufficient material everywhere in everyday life for the student of psychology to investigate and explain without seeking for cases of an abnormal character. If a medium submits the control over his imagination to another being, he becomes his servant. This other being may be another person, or it may be an idea, an emotion, a passion, and the effect on the passive medium will be proportionate to the intensity of the action manifested by them. It may be an elemental, an astral corpse, or a malicious influence, and the medium may become an epileptic, a maniac, or a criminal. A person who surrenders the control over his imagination indiscriminately to every unknown power is not less insane than he who would entrust his money and valuables to the first unknown stranger or vagabond that would ask him for it. Mediumship is nothing else but a process of transfer of thought and differs from an ordinary magnetic experiment only insofar as in the latter the operator is a visible person, while in the former the influence proceeds from an invisible source, and is the more dangerous because, being invisible, it is not known from whence it proceeds. If a magnetizer commands his subject to commit a murder, the latter may commit it even after he has awakened from his sleep. In such a case, the operator is the murderer, and the subject merely the instrument. How many murders and crimes are committed every year through sensitive persons who have been influenced or mesmerized by visible persons or invisible thoughts to commit them, and who had not sufficient willpower to resist, it is impossible to determine. In such cases we hang or punish the instrument, but the real culprit escapes. Such a justice is equivalent to punishing a stick with which a murder has been committed, and to let the man who used the stick go free. Verily, the coming generations will have as much cause to laugh at the ignorance of their ancestors as we now laugh at the ignorance of those who preceded us. The state of the imagination is a great factor in the observation and appreciation of things. The savage may see in the sculptured Minerva only a curious piece of rock, and a beautiful painting may be to him only a piece of cloth daubed over with colours. The greedy miser, on looking at the beauties of nature, thinks only of the money value they represent, while for the poet the forest swarms with fairies and the water with spirits. The artist finds beautiful forms in the wandering clouds and in the projecting rocks of the mountains, and to him who the wind is poetic, every symbol in nature becomes a poem and suggests to him new ideas. But the coward wanders through life with a scowl upon his face. He sees in every corner an enemy, and for him the world has nothing attractive except his own little self. The man who cannot be trusted is ever mistrustful. The thief fears to be robbed, and the backbiter is extremely sensitive to the gossip of others. The cause of this is evidently that each man perceives only those elements which exist in his own mind, and if any foreign element enters, it is immediately tinctured and coloured by the former. The world is a mirror wherein every man may see his own face. To him whose soul is beautiful, the world will look beautiful. To him whose soul is deformed, everything will seem to be evil. The impressions made on the mind by the effects of the imagination may be powerful and lasting upon the person. They may change or distort the features. They may render the hair white in a single hour. They may mark, kill, disfigure, or break the bones of the unborn child, and make the effects of injuries received by one person visible upon the body of another with whom that person is in sympathy. They may act more powerfully than drugs. They cause and cure diseases, induce visions and hallucinations, and may produce stigmata in so-called saints. Imagination performs its miracles either consciously or unconsciously in all departments of nature. By altering the surroundings of animals at such times, their colour can be changed at will. The tiger's stripes are said to correspond with the long jungle grass, and the leopard's spots resemble the speckled light falling through the leaves. The forces of nature, influenced by the imagination of man, act on the imagination of nature and create tendencies on the astral plane, which, in the course of evolution, find expression through material forms. In this way, man's vices or virtues become objective realities, and as man's mind becomes purified, the earth becomes more beautiful and refined, while his vices find their expression in poisonous reptiles and noxious plants. The soul of the world has its animal elementary existences corresponding to those existing in the animal soul of man. Either are the products of thought evolution. The elementals in the soul of man are the products of the action of the thought in the individual mind of man. The elemental forms in the soul of the world are the products of the collective thoughts of all beings. Animal elementary powers are attracted to the germs of animals and grow into objective, visible animal form, and modify the characters and also the outward appearance of the animals of our globe. We therefore see that as the imagination of the universal mind changes during the course of ages, old forms disappear and new ones come into existence. Perhaps if there were no snakes in human forms, the snakes of the animal kingdom would cease to exist. But the impressions made on the mind do not end with the life of the individual on the physical plane. A cause which produces a sudden terror or otherwise acts strongly on the imagination may produce an impression that not only lasts through life but beyond it. A person, for instance, who during his life has strongly believed in the existence of eternal damnation and hellfire, may, at his entrance into the subjective state after death, actually behold all the terrors of hell which his imagination during life has conjured up. There may have been no premature burial. The physical body may have been actually dead, but the terrified soul, seeing before it all the horrors of its own vivid imagination, rushes back again into the deserted body and clings to it in despair, seeking protection. personal consciousness returns, and it finds itself alive in the grave, where it may pass a second time through the pangs of death, or by sending out its astral form in search of sustenance from the living, it may become a vampire and prolong for a while its horrible existence. Such misfortunes are by no means rare, and the best remedy for it is knowledge or the cremation of the body soon after death. In the state after death, the imagination neither creates new and original forms, nor is it capable of receiving new impressions, but it, so to say, lives on the sum of the impressions accumulated during life, which may evolve innumerable variations of mental estates, symbolized in their corresponding subjective forms, and lasting a longer or shorter period until their forces are exhausted. These mental states may be called elusive in the same sense as the forms and events of the physical life may be called elusive, and life in heaven or hell may be called a dream, in the same sense as life on the earth is called a dream. The dream of life only differs from the dream after death, that during the former we are able to make use of our will to guide and control our imagination and acts, while during the latter that guidance is wanting, and we yearn that which we have sown, whether it is pleasant or not. No effort, whether for good or for evil, is ever lost. Those who have reached out in their imagination towards a high ideal on earth will find it in heaven. Those whose desires have dragged them down will sink to the level of their desires. It is said that the most material and sensual thoughts create forms in the subjective condition which will appear to him who created them after he enters that sphere even more gross, dense and material than the material forms of the terrestrial world, nor does this seem incomprehensible if we remember that everything is composed of thought substance and that the terms density, materiality, etc. are merely relative terms. What appear to us dense and material now may appear ethereal or vaporous if we are in another state, and things which are invisible to us now may appear grossly material then. A due consideration of the relations existing between consciousness and what we call matter will make it appear that there may be worlds more dense and material to its inhabitants than our physical world is to us. For it is the light of the spirit that enlivens matter, and the more matter is attracted by sensuality and concentrated by selfishness, the less penetrable to the spirit will it become, and the more dense and hard will it grow, although it may for all that not be perceptible to our physical senses, the latter being adapted merely to our present state of existence. We should enter the higher life now, instead of waiting for it to come to us in the hereafter. The term heaven means a state of spiritual consciousness and enjoyment of spiritual truths. But how can he who has evolved no such consciousness and no spiritual power of perception enjoy the perception of things which he has not the power to perceive? A man without that faculty entering heaven would be like a man blind and deaf and without the power to feel. Man can only enjoy that which he is able to realize, that which he cannot perceive does not exist for him. The surest way to be happy is to rise above all selfish considerations. People crave for amusement and pastimes, but to forget one's time is to forget oneself, and by forgetting that themselves they are rendered glad. People are rendered temporarily happy by illusions, because while they enjoy an illusion, they forget their own personal selves. The charm of music consists in the temporary absorption it causes to the personality in the harmony of sound. If we witness a theatrical performance and enter into the spirit of the play, we forget our personal sorrows and live, so to say, in the personality of the actor. The actor who understands how to absorb our attention absorbs our personal consciousness and becomes inspired by our own enthusiasm. An actor from whom the sympathy of the audience is withheld will find it difficult to play his part well. An orator who is in full accord with his audience becomes inspired with the sentiments of his audience. It is his audience that gives expressions of his feelings through him. While he speaks, he may forget the part he has intended to speak and give expression to that which his audience feels. Without being aware of it, we actually live and feel and think within each other. If we enter a cathedral or a temple whose architecture inspires sublimity and solemnity, expanding the soul, where the language of music speaks to the heart, drawing it away from the attachment to the earth, if the beauty and odour of flowers lull the senses into a forgetfulness of self, such illusions may render us temporarily happy to an extent proportionate to the degree in which they succeed in destroying our consciousness of personality and self. And as such they are immeasurably better than other illusions that appeal to the lower personal self. But if we seek for the truth in the outward expression of a form, instead of looking for it in the principle which the form is to represent, we will be led into darkness instead of being led into light. For this reason, the belief in external gods strengthens the illusions of self. They induce men to become cowards, to ask for favours which they do not deserve, in preference to other men that deserve them. They help to establish the autocracy of priests and to put the false priest upon a throne from which the true God has been excluded. Such misconceptions destroy the dignity of mankind, and a religious system based upon such practices degrades men instead of elevating their character. He who has grown to live above the illusion of form and recognizes the existence of the true God in his heart needs no illusions to guide his attention. He carries the temple of the eternal God in his own soul and worships it without ceremonies and rites by perpetual adoration.